My name is Rami Khalil. To my community, I am a teacher, a guide, a servant of Allah's will. To my family, I am a husband and father, a man of quiet determination and faith that sustains me through every trial life has presented. And to myself, I am a seeker of truth, determined to fulfill my purpose in this life and beyond. For years, my life revolved around the mosque and the teachings of the Quran. From dawn to dusk, my days were anchored by prayer, sermons, and the moments of quiet counsel I offered to anyone in need. Moving my family to this country had been an opportunity, an extension of my mission to bring the light of Islam to unfamiliar shores. It was both a leap of faith and a calculated decision, one my wife wholeheartedly supported. Together we believed in the significance of our work and trusted it was all part of Allah's grand plan. Our home here was modest but warm, a sanctuary where every corner whispered devotion. It was decorated with the calligraphy of Quranic verses and the simple symbols that reminded us of faith's ever-present guidance. I would sit in the garden in the early hours before dawn, my tasbih in hand, counting the beads and whispering supplications into the morning air. Every decision I made felt rooted in unwavering certainty. My belief in Allah's mercy and justice was an unshakable anchor against life's storms. When members of my congregation came to me with their fears or doubts, I reminded them that it is trust in Allah that steadies us. And yet, in hindsight, I wonder, was my own faith truly unshakable? Or had I, over decades of steady devotion, mistaken familiarity for certainty? The year I turned 67 marked an ominous change. It started simply, as subtle pains in my abdomen, sharp enough to momentarily catch my breath, but fleeting enough to dismiss as indigestion. Perhaps it was the food, I thought. Perhaps just fatigue. But weeks went by, and the pains grew persistent, more intense. It was my wife who first suggested a visit to the doctor. "Rami," she said gently one evening after dinner, her gaze filled with concern, "you mustn't ignore this. Promise me you'll go, for the sake of us all." Reluctantly, I agreed. I reassured her that it was nothing serious, though the anxious knot in my stomach hinted otherwise. When the appointment finally arrived, I sat in the cold, sterile office while the doctor reviewed the tests, blood work, scans, analyses I barely understood. His words, when they came, altered the course of my life irrevocably. Stage 4 stomach cancer. The words rang through the room like a deafening echo, shattering the ordinary peace of our existence. I looked to my wife, whose pale face silently reflected the same disbelief I felt. The finality of it hung heavy in the air, like a weight pressing down on my chest. But amidst the despair, a quiet conviction emerged. This was not an accident. It was part of my test. As Prophet Ibrahim had faced his own, that night, after praying together in hushed tones, I made a declaration. "This is my trial," I told my wife, "and we shall meet it with courage and trust. Allah has never abandoned us, and He won't now." She nodded, her eyes damp with tears, though her silence revealed how deeply she feared losing me. The days that followed were relentless, marked by cycles of chemotherapy and suffering. The treatments drained me physically, reducing my once vibrant body to a weakened shadow of its former self. But within the torment, I clung tightly to my faith. Every injection, every drip of medication, every sleepless night was met with whispered supplications. At night, when exhaustion kept me from sleep, I would recite verses from the Quran to steady my spirit. Still, doubt crept in, like shadows slipping into the corners of a room. There were moments, rare but unsettling, where the pain was so overwhelming, I questioned the justice I had preached for years. How could I reconcile this suffering with Allah's mercy? How could I accept that this trial was not punishment, but divine wisdom? It was one evening in particular, after a grueling round of treatment, when everything changed. I had returned home feeling weaker than ever, my body a vessel of pain that refused even the most basic comforts. I sat in my favorite chair near the window, listening to the sounds of life continuing outside, a child's laughter, the rustle of leaves in the wind. As I closed my eyes, a tightness began to build in my chest. It was subtle at first, but soon became unbearable, leaving me gasping for breath. Fear gripped me like a vice. I tried to call out to my wife, who was in the next room, but the words wouldn't come. Darkness began to close in, swallowing everything around me. The last sensation I remember was the cold floor against my skin as I collapsed. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in my body. The scene unfolded below me as though I were an observer rather than a participant. Paramedics surrounded my lifeless form, their voices urgent, their hands moving frantically to revive me. My wife sobbed, her face contorted with grief as she clutched her trembling hands. Strangely, I felt no fear, no panic. Instead, a calmness enveloped me, as though this separation from my physical self was the natural progression of things. I watched it all unfold with an eerie sense of detachment. And then a light appeared. It began as a faint glow in the distance, warm and inviting, drawing me toward it with an undeniable pull. As the chaos below faded from focus, the light grew brighter, surrounding me with its comforting embrace. All the pain, doubt, and fear melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. In that moment, I believed I was meeting Allah. Tears streamed down my face as I drifted closer to the light, its warmth filling every corner of my being. But just as I reached out, desperate to fully immerse myself in its radiance, something shifted. The light dimmed, replaced by darkness. The year I turned 67 began like any other. Life followed its familiar rhythm, a steady cadence of early prayers, heartfelt sermons, and moments of quiet reflection in the evenings. To anyone looking in from the outside, I was the picture of contentment. But within me, something was beginning to shift. It started with a subtle discomfort, a sharp ache in my abdomen that would come and go like a passing shadow. At first, I dismissed it, attributing the sensation to poor sleep or something I'd eaten. "No need to make a fuss," I told my wife when she noticed me wincing during dinner. "It's nothing. Just a small upset, I'm sure." She watched me quietly for a moment before nodding, though the furrow in her brow betrayed her concern. But as the weeks rolled on, the pain grew bolder, taking root like an unwelcome guest. It arrived uninvited in moments of peace, slicing through my body with precision. Even the simple act of sitting to read the Quran became a trial. My wife noticed my discomfort more often, her gentle nudges growing firmer with each passing day. "Rami," she said one night as I sat rubbing my abdomen, "you need to see a doctor. Please, don't delay." Her voice held that blend of love and exasperation only she could manage, a tone that never failed to remind me why I trusted her above all others. I waved her off at first, insisting it was unnecessary, but deep down I knew she was right. Days later, I found myself sitting in a brightly lit clinic, my wife's hand resting lightly on mine. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled the air, mingling with the sound of distant conversations and the occasional beeping of medical equipment. A nurse guided me through a series of tests, blood work, imaging scans, consultations with specialists. My discomfort grew with each step, though not from physical pain. No, it was the unspoken possibility of what the tests might uncover that gnawed at me. When the doctor finally called us into his office, his expression gave away more than his words ever could. He didn't look at me immediately, his gaze fixed on the folder in his hands. My wife's grip on my hand tightened as we waited for him to speak. "Mr. Khalil," he began, his tone measured and serious, "the results of your tests have come back." He paused, glancing up at me with a mixture of sympathy and professionalism. "It's not the news we were hoping for. You have stage 4 stomach cancer." In that instant, the room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in around me. I could see the doctor's lips moving, hear the sound of his voice, but the words felt distant, like echoes in a vast empty space. "Cancer," I repeated inwardly, the weight of the words sinking deep into my chest. My wife gasped softly beside me, her hand trembling against mine. The color had drained from her face, leaving her pale and wide-eyed. I turned to her, forcing a small, reassuring smile despite the storm brewing inside me. "It's all right," I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The days that followed blurred together, a whirlwind of appointments, discussions about treatment options, and the beginning of chemotherapy. The experience was unlike anything I had imagined. The first session left me nauseated and weak, my body betraying me in ways I had never known. The smell of the clinic, the sterile environment, the slow drip of medication into my veins, all of it seemed designed to chip away at my resolve. Yet, in the face of this new trial, I clung tightly to my faith. Every moment of discomfort became an opportunity for prayer. As the chemicals coursed through my body, attacking the cancer but leaving me drained, I whispered supplications under my breath, seeking strength from Allah. "O Allah," I prayed silently, "grant me the patience to endure this trial. Let me face it with courage, as your prophets did before me." At night, when sleep eluded me, I turned to the Quran. I read the stories of the prophets who had faced unimaginable hardships yet never wavered in their devotion. I thought of Prophet Ibrahim, who was asked to sacrifice his son, and Prophet Yusuf, who endured betrayal and imprisonment. Their faith had remained steadfast, their trust in Allah unbroken. But even as I drew strength from their stories, doubt began to creep in, unwelcome and insidious. There were nights when the pain was so intense, so unrelenting, that I found myself questioning the fairness of it all. Why me? I wondered in the darkness, my voice barely a whisper. Why now, when there is still so much I wish to do? These thoughts weighed heavily on me, yet I kept them to myself. I couldn't burden my wife with my fears, not when she was already carrying so much. She stood by me through every appointment, every treatment, her quiet strength a constant presence. I watched as she cared for me with unwavering devotion, even as the toll of my illness left her weary and worn. One evening, after an especially grueling session of chemotherapy, I sat alone in our living room, staring out the window at the stars above. The world outside seemed so vast, so indifferent to the struggles unfolding within me. My wife had gone to bed, her exhaustion finally overcoming her resolve to stay awake with me. As I gazed at the heavens, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks, peace. It was fleeting, but in that moment I was reminded of Allah's greatness, of the intricate design of the universe, and the role each of us plays within it. I didn't know why I had been chosen to face this trial, but I resolved to trust in Allah's wisdom. "This is my test," I said softly, the words carrying a quiet conviction, "and I will face it with faith." Little did I know, the true test had only just begun. I had always thought I understood the balance of life and death, the rhythm of existence, but no teachings, no parable, no scripture could have prepared me for the moment my own life unraveled. The paramedics worked frantically around my collapsed body, the chaos of their movements strangely muted from where I floated above. My wife sobbed beside them, her hands clasped together as though the act itself might summon a miracle. I wanted to comfort her, to reach out and assure her that I was still here, but the bridge between us had been severed. The room beneath me dimmed into irrelevance as I became aware of something beyond, the faint light that had appeared in the distance during my out-of-body state. It pulsed gently, like the soft glow of a firefly in the darkness, inviting me closer. I felt an overwhelming compulsion to move toward it, as though the light held every answer I'd ever sought. As I drifted closer, the chaotic scene of my lifeless body began to fade away. The sharp edges of fear, pain, and confusion softened, replaced by a profound sense of calm. The light grew brighter, enveloping me in its warmth like an embrace that transcended the physical. It was then that the memories began, fragments of my past flashing before me in vivid detail. My childhood spent running barefoot through the streets of my hometown. The moment I recited my first surah at the mosque, the pride radiating from my parents' faces. My wedding day, the first cries of my newborn daughter, the countless sermons I had given, urging others to trust in Allah's plan. Each memory felt alive, not like a recollection, but like an echo that resonated through every fiber of my being. I realized I was witnessing my life in its entirety, stripped of pretense, laid bare in the glow of that light. But just as I was overcome with the warmth of those memories, the environment around me shifted. The light flickered, its inviting glow growing dim until it was replaced by an oppressive gray haze. The calm I had felt moments ago was now replaced by a growing unease. The air around me grew colder, thicker, heavy with an indescribable weight. I looked down and saw that I was no longer floating but standing on a barren expanse of ground. Beneath me, the earth was cracked and lifeless, its surface devoid of color or warmth. Twisted trees loomed in the distance, their branches barren and skeletal, creaking as though they were alive. And then came the cries. They began as faint whispers, barely audible over the stillness of the landscape, but soon they grew louder, wails of anguish and despair that pierced through the silence like jagged shards of glass. The cries surrounded me, echoing from every direction, yet I could see no source for the sounds. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision, and then another, until the landscape seemed alive with shifting forms. Figures began to emerge from the haze, their shapes indistinct but undeniably human. They wandered aimlessly, their faces contorted in pain, their hands outstretched as though reaching for something that eluded them. A pang of sorrow gripped me as I watched them, an ache that resonated deep within my soul. These were not the souls of the damned as I had imagined them, suffering in eternal punishment. No, their agony was something else entirely, an emptiness, a longing, a desperate search for meaning. I wanted to help them, to offer them the solace and guidance that had always been my purpose. But as I stepped forward, I felt an invisible force holding me back, as though the very ground beneath me resisted my movement. Suddenly the cries ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence that felt heavier than the loudest sound. In the stillness I became aware of a presence, a force that seemed to fill the space around me. And then I saw it, the throne. It rose from the desolation like a monolith, its structure both magnificent and terrifying. Carved from dark, jagged stone, its surface was adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to writhe and shift in the dim light. It exuded an aura of immense power, its presence both commanding and unsettling. Sitting upon the throne was a figure, their form bound in chains that snaked around their limbs and torso. The chains were impossibly thick, their weight pulling the figure downward, their posture one of defeat. Their head hung low, their face obscured by the shadows cast by the throne's towering back. I felt a pull, a compulsion to approach the throne despite the dread it inspired within me. As I drew closer, the figure raised its head, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Prophet Yusuf. His face was unmistakable, the same visage I had revered and spoken of countless times in my sermons. But this was not the Prophet Yusuf I knew from Scripture, graceful, forgiving, triumphant. The man before me was bound, his eyes filled with pain and sorrow, his expression one of quiet resignation. "No," I whispered, the word escaping my lips without thought. "This cannot be." Prophet Yusuf's gaze met mine, and in that moment I felt an overwhelming wave of emotion, sorrow, regret, and a profound sense of loss. It was as though his suffering mirrored my own, reflected back at me in its entirety. The stillness was broken by a voice, deep and resonant, that seemed to vibrate through the very air around me. "Rami Khalil," it intoned, its tone neither harsh nor kind. "Do you see now? Do you understand?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning that eluded me. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. What was I meant to see? What was I meant to understand? The voice continued, unrelenting in its presence. "Your life has been a journey of faith, but what have you truly sought? What have you truly found? Tears streamed down my face as the weight of the question settled upon me. I thought of my sermons, my teachings, the countless times I had assured others of Allah's mercy and justice. Had I truly believed those words, or had I simply repeated them, never questioning their depth or meaning? The figure on the throne held my gaze, silent yet commanding, and in that silence I felt the beginning of an answer, not one born of clarity, but one forged in doubt. This place was not a punishment. It was not paradise, nor was it the hellfire I had envisioned. It was something else entirely, a place of reckoning, a crucible in which the truths I had avoided were now laid bare. And as the voice spoke once more, its words echoing through the desolation, I knew that my journey was far from over. When I awoke, or at least when I became aware again, I was no longer in the dim desolation where shadows wept, nor was I tethered to the confines of my failing body. Instead, I was surrounded by light. It wasn't the harsh, blinding light of the physical world, but a glow that was gentle, warm, and alive. It seemed to pulsate with a rhythm, as if it were breathing. The light felt like an embrace, pulling me closer, wrapping itself around me in a way that defied description. It was as though it knew every part of me, every joy, every sorrow, every moment I thought I had forgotten. And in that knowing, it offered comfort without judgment. As I drifted toward its center, a melody began to fill the air. It wasn't music as we understand it, no instruments, no voices, yet it resonated within me, stirring memories that had long been buried. It was the sound of my mother's lullabies, the verses of the Quran recited in my father's deep, steady voice, the laughter of my daughter when she was young. Each note carried me back to a moment in time, painting vivid scenes before me. I saw my childhood home, a modest house with walls worn by time but filled with love. I saw myself, a boy of 7, sitting cross-legged on the floor as my father taught me the opening surah of the Quran. His voice was calm and deliberate, his words carrying the weight of generations past. I could almost feel the coarse texture of the carpet beneath my fingers, the coolness of the evening air drifting in through the open window. Next, I saw the first prayer I ever led as a young man. The memory was sharp and clear, the way my hands trembled as I raised them in takbir, the murmurs of encouragement from the elders behind me, the pride I saw in my father's eyes when I finished. That day had marked a turning point in my life, the moment I fully embraced my role as a servant of Allah. The scenes continued, each one a fragment of my life flowing seamlessly from one to the next. I saw my wedding day, my wife's shy smile as she looked at me from beneath her veil, the joy that radiated from her as we began our life together. I saw the birth of my daughter, her tiny fingers curling around mine for the first time, and the overwhelming sense of responsibility that had filled my heart in that instant. With each memory, the light grew warmer, brighter, more encompassing. It felt as though it were drawing these moments from within me, weaving them into a tapestry that celebrated every triumph and trial I had faced. And yet, there was no sense of judgment, no weighing of good and bad, right and wrong. It simply was. For the first time since my journey began, I felt truly at peace. This is it, I thought. This is the presence of Allah. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sorrow or regret. They were tears of gratitude, of awe, of unfiltered joy. I felt whole in a way I never had before, as though every piece of my being had fallen into place. I could have stayed in that light forever, lost in its warmth, its love, its perfection. But then something changed. At first it was subtle, a faint ripple that passed through the light, almost imperceptible. But as the ripple grew, the warmth began to wane. The melodies that had filled the air faded into silence, replaced by a growing tension. The light, once steady and unwavering, began to flicker. Panic surged within me. I reached out, desperate to hold on to the peace I had felt. But it was slipping away. The light dimmed further, its glow replaced by shadows that crept in from the edges of my vision. And then I heard it, a whisper. It came from all around me, soft and indistinct at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. It wasn't a single voice, but many, overlapping and intertwining until they became a chorus. Their words were unclear, their tone unsettling, and they seemed to carry with them a weight that pressed down on me, making it harder to breathe. I tried to call out, to ask what was happening, but my voice didn't come. The light continued to fade, and with it, the peace I had felt just moments ago. The warmth was gone now, replaced by a chill that seeped into my very core. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they became a cacophony that drowned out all else. And then, just as suddenly as they had begun, they stopped. In the silence that followed, I became aware of a new presence, something vast and unknowable. It didn't reveal itself through sight or sound, but I could feel it pressing against me from all sides, observing me with an intensity that made my soul tremble. And then I heard a voice, Rami Khalil, it said, deep and resonant, each word carrying the weight of eternity. You are not yet ready. The light was gone now, replaced by a darkness so complete it felt like a physical presence. I could no longer see, could no longer move, could no longer feel anything but the oppressive weight of that voice. You must return, it continued. Your journey is not yet complete. I wanted to protest, to ask why, but the words wouldn't come. Before I could comprehend what was happening, the darkness began to shift. It swirled around me, pulling me downward faster and faster, until I felt as though I were falling. And then, with a jolt, I opened my eyes. I was back in my body, back in the hospital room where the paramedics had brought me. The sounds of machines beeping and voices murmuring filled the air, a stark contrast to the serenity I had just left behind. My chest ached with every breath. My limbs felt heavy and foreign, but I was alive. Yet, as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that a part of me had been left behind. The warmth of the light was gone. Where once I had felt the embrace of peace and love, I was now engulfed by a suffocating darkness. The chill seeped into my very being, a cold so profound it felt as though it had settled not just into my body, but into my soul. I stood, or perhaps I floated, there was no way to tell, in the midst of an oppressive void. This darkness was alive, not merely an absence of light, but an entity unto itself, heavy and stifling, wrapping around me like a shroud. The silence was piercing, broken only by the sound of my own breathing, shallow and labored. And then the whispers began. They were faint at first, so soft I wasn't sure if they were real or imagined, but soon they grew louder, distinct, intertwining to form a chilling cacophony. These whispers carried no words I could discern, yet their tone was unmistakable, accusatory, relentless, and filled with a sorrow that sank into me like an anchor. I wanted to cover my ears, to block them out, but I found I couldn't move. My body, if it could even be called that in this place, was unresponsive, as though bound by an unseen force. All I could do was endure. The voices began to form words, and I realized with dawning horror that they were not unfamiliar. They were my own. Every doubt I had ever whispered in my heart, every question I had buried beneath the veneer of unshakable faith, echoed back at me now. They were fragments of prayers said in moments of weakness, fleeting thoughts I had pushed aside, never daring to confront them head on. "Why me?" one voice cried, trembling with despair. "Why this trial? Haven't I served you faithfully? Is this truly justice?" Another voice whispered, heavy with doubt. I wanted to deny them, to insist they weren't mine, but I couldn't. I knew these words. They had been my words, my doubts, my fears, my questions about Allah's will. In the darkness, there was no hiding from them. As the voices swirled around me, the environment began to shift. Shapes emerged from the shadows, indistinct at first, then growing sharper, more vivid. They were scenes from my life, memories long forgotten, brought forth with painful clarity. I saw myself as a young man, standing at the entrance of the mosque where I had just delivered my first sermon. I remembered the pride I had felt that day, the confidence that I was fulfilling my divine purpose. But now, as I watched from this otherworldly vantage point, I noticed the subtle flicker of doubt in my younger self's eyes. Had I truly believed every word I had spoken, or had there been a part of me that wondered if I was enough? Another scene appeared, a moment I had buried deep within me. It was late at night, years ago, long after my family had gone to bed. I had been kneeling in prayer, my forehead pressed to the floor, tears streaming down my face. I had whispered into the silence, "Why do you test me so, Allah? Have I not been faithful?" More scenes followed, each one a fragment of my past, each one a moment of doubt, fear, or regret that I had hidden from the world and from myself. As I watched, the weight of these revelations pressed down on me, threatening to crush me. I had spent my life as a servant of Allah, a guide to others, a man of faith. But now, faced with the unfiltered truth of my own soul, I saw how fragile that faith had been at times. The darkness around me shifted again, and I found myself standing before a massive scale. It was ancient and ornate, its golden arms balanced precariously, its plates empty and waiting. The sight of it filled me with both awe and dread. A voice echoed through the void, deep and resonant, vibrating through every corner of my being. "Rami Khalil," it intoned, its tone neither harsh nor gentle, but unyielding. "Your life will now be weighed." I stood frozen as the first plate of the scale began to fill with golden orbs, each one a representation of the good I had done in my life. I saw moments of kindness, of compassion, of selflessness. I saw the countless times I had counseled those in need, the prayers I had offered, the love I had shown my family. The sight filled me with a momentary sense of relief. Surely, I thought, these would outweigh the doubts and fears that had haunted me. But then the second plate began to fill. This one was not gold but shadow. Dark, swirling orbs that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Each one represented a moment of weakness, a hidden doubt, a missed opportunity to do what was right. I saw the times I had let fear keep me from speaking the full truth, the times I had chosen the easier path rather than the righteous one. The scales teetered, their balance shifting back and forth as each new orb was added. I watched with bated breath, my heart pounding as I realized just how close the balance was. When the final orb fell into place, the scales stilled. The silence that followed was deafening. "Do you see now?" the voice asked, and this time I could hear a note of sorrow in its tone. "Do you understand the weight of your choices?" Tears streamed down my face as I fell to my knees before the scale. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I see, I understand." The voice softened. "Your journey is not yet over, Rami Khalil. There is still more to learn, more to confront. Only then will you find the truth you seek." The scales faded from view, and the darkness began to lift. But the weight of what I had seen remained heavy upon my heart. The darkness parted like a veil, giving way to an expanse that seemed to stretch infinitely. My surroundings were neither wholly barren nor entirely alive. They existed somewhere in between, a liminal space where reality and impossibility intertwined. The ground beneath me was cold, solid, yet when I looked down I saw nothing to confirm it was even there. For what felt like an eternity, I wandered, guided by nothing but the weight of uncertainty that pressed heavily against me. The whispers had grown silent, leaving only the sound of my own breathing to accompany my steps. Yet with every move I felt a pull, a subtle, almost imperceptible force drawing me toward something unseen. And then I saw it, the throne. It rose from the ground like a monolith, towering above everything else in this strange expanse. Its surface was carved with patterns so intricate and elaborate that they seemed to shift and writhe as I stared at them. The carvings depicted scenes of creation and destruction, life and death, joy and suffering. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a paradox that mirrored the very nature of existence. The throne itself radiated power, an aura so immense I felt its vibrations resonate through my entire being. It wasn't the kind of power that inspired awe or reverence. It was the kind that demanded introspection, forcing me to confront every truth and lie I had ever held within myself. As I stepped closer, I noticed the figure seated upon the throne, a presence that stopped me in my tracks and made my heart race. The figure wasn't imposing in stature, but its aura was undeniably overwhelming. It was cloaked in shadows, its features obscured, yet its essence was unmistakable. I knew this presence without seeing it. I had felt it in my prayers, in my moments of despair, in the whispers of hope that had carried me through life's trials. The figure's gaze, though hidden, seemed to pierce through me, unraveling every thought, every emotion, every memory. I stood frozen before it, unable to move, unable to speak, as though the throne itself held me captive. A voice emerged from the figure, deep and resonant, carrying a weight that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of existence. "Rami Khalil," it said, each syllable deliberate and unyielding. "Do you understand the path you have walked?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. How could I answer such a question? Did I truly understand my path? Did anyone ever truly understand the fullness of their journey? The figure's voice continued, relentless in its inquiry. "You have lived a life guided by faith, yet you have carried doubt within your heart. You have preached truth to others, yet you have not fully grasped it yourself. Why, Rami Khalil? Why have you not sought to know?" Tears streamed down my face as the weight of its words settled upon me. I had spent my life serving Allah, dedicating myself to guiding others, yet here I was, confronted by the reality of my own inadequacies. Had I truly known Allah, or had I merely accepted the truths handed down to me without question? The throne pulsed with light, its patterns shifting to reveal scenes from my life, moments of triumph, moments of failure, moments where my faith had wavered. Each image was more vivid than the last, and each one struck me with a clarity I had never felt before. I saw myself as a young man, delivering my first sermon, my voice trembling with nervousness but carried by conviction. I saw the faces of those I had counseled, their tears, their gratitude. I saw the moments I had stood strong in the face of adversity, and the moments I had faltered, overcome by fear and uncertainty. And then I saw the moments I had avoided, the times I had doubted the words I preached, the nights I had questioned Allah's justice, His mercy, His plan, the fleeting thoughts I had buried deep within myself, too afraid to confront them. The voice spoke again, softer this time, yet no less powerful. "Do you see now, Rami Khalil? Do you see the truth of who you are?" I fell to my knees before the throne, the weight of its revelations pressing down on me. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I see. I understand." The figure's gaze seemed to soften, its presence less overwhelming now. "Your journey is not yet complete," it said. "There is more to learn, more to confront. Only then will you find the peace you seek." The throne began to fade, its light dimming until it was swallowed by the darkness once more. But this time, the darkness did not feel oppressive. It was not a void, but a space of possibility, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. As I stood there, alone in the expanse, I felt the pull once more, guiding me toward the next chapter of my journey. The throne faded into the abyss, leaving me alone in an empty expanse that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The darkness was no longer oppressive, yet it held an undeniable weight, a quiet insistence that demanded my attention. The silence was profound, broken only by the sound of my own shallow breaths. Then the voice returned. "Rami Khalil," it intoned, its words reverberating through the void like thunder. "Your journey has brought you to the edge of understanding, but tell me, what is the truth you seek?" The question was simple, yet it struck me with the force of a tempest. What was the truth I sought? For years I had lived my life guided by faith, certain that I understood my purpose and the path laid out before me. But now, as I stood in this place that defied all comprehension, I realized how little I truly knew. "I seek you," I whispered, my voice trembling with uncertainty. "I seek the answers that will lead me to you." The voice was silent for a moment, as though pondering my response. When it spoke again, its tone was softer, yet no less commanding. "Do you know who I am?" it asked. "Do you know the essence of the one you have worshipped?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Of course, I knew Allah. I had spent my life in devotion to Him, preaching His mercy and justice, offering prayers and seeking His guidance. Yet here, in this place where every truth was laid bare, I found myself questioning the depth of my understanding. The darkness around me began to shift, swirling and coalescing into shapes that were both familiar and foreign. Scenes unfolded before me, vivid and tangible, as though pulled from the depths of my soul. I saw the stars, endless constellations stretching across the heavens, their light piercing through the void with a brilliance that left me breathless. Each star seemed to pulse with life, a reminder of the vastness of creation and the power of the one who had brought it into being. I saw the earth, a fragile, beautiful sphere suspended in the infinite expanse of the cosmos. Its oceans sparkled like sapphires, its lands vibrant with life, its atmosphere shimmering with the colors of dawn and twilight. I marveled at its complexity, at the intricate balance that sustained it, at the countless forms of life that called it home. And then I saw humanity. I saw our triumphs and our failures, our kindness and our cruelty, our endless search for meaning and our stubborn resistance to change. I saw the moments of joy that bound us together and the moments of suffering that tore us apart. I saw the wars we waged, the love we shared, the hopes we carried, and the fears that held us back. The voice spoke again, its tone laced with sorrow. "Do you see now, Rami Khalil? Do you see the truth of the world you have inhabited?" Tears streamed down my face as I nodded, unable to form a coherent response. I had always believed in Allah's plan, in the wisdom that guided creation, in the justice that balanced life and death. But now, as I stood before the unfolding truth, I realized how limited my understanding had been. The scenes shifted, revealing moments from my own life. I saw myself as a child, running barefoot through the streets of my hometown, laughing with friends as the sun set behind the hills. I saw the pride in my parents' eyes as I recited my first surah at the mosque, their hands clasped together in silent prayer. I saw the joy of my wedding day, the birth of my daughter, the countless sermons I had delivered, urging others to trust in Allah's mercy and justice. And then I saw the moments I had buried deep within me, the nights I had knelt in prayer, my heart heavy with doubt, whispering questions into the silence, the fleeting thoughts I had dismissed, too afraid to confront them, the times I had faltered in my faith, choosing the easier path rather than the righteous one. The voice grew louder, its words resonating through every fiber of my being. "Rami Khalil," it said, "you have lived a life guided by faith, but you have not sought the fullness of truth. You have accepted what was given to you, yet you have not questioned what lies beyond." Why is that? I fell to my knees, my hands trembling as I clutched my chest. I was afraid, I admitted, my voice barely audible. I was afraid that questioning would lead me away from you, that doubt would consume me, that I would lose the faith that has sustained me. The voice softened, its tone carrying a hint of compassion. "To question is not to betray," it said. "To doubt is not to abandon. It is in the search for truth that faith is strengthened, that understanding is deepened, that the soul is purified. Do you see now, Rami Khalil, the path you must walk?" I nodded, my tears falling freely as the weight of its words settled upon me. "Yes," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. "I see, I understand. I will seek the truth, no matter where it leads." The darkness began to lift, replaced by a soft, golden light that enveloped me like a warm embrace. The voice spoke one final time, its words carrying a sense of both finality and hope. "Your journey is not yet over," it said. "There is still much to learn, much to discover. But remember, Rami Khalil, that the answers you seek are not found in certainty, but in the willingness to ask, to explore, and to trust in the one who guides you." The light grew brighter, and I felt a pull, a gentle yet insistent force drawing me back toward the world I had left behind. I closed my eyes, surrendering to its embrace, and when I opened them again, I was back in my body. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of medical equipment and the soft murmurs of the nurses. I felt weak, my body heavy and unfamiliar, yet I was alive. My wife sat beside me, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her hands clutching mine as though she feared I might slip away again. "I'm here," I whispered, my voice hoarse but steady. "I'm here." She nodded, tears streaming down her face as she pressed her forehead against mine. In that moment, I knew that my journey was far from over. The questions that had haunted me, the truths I had glimpsed, the path I had vowed to walk, they would shape the rest of my life. But for now, I was content to simply be. The light that had enveloped me began to fade, its warmth slipping away as I felt a pull, a force gentle yet insistent, tugging me back toward the world I had left behind. I resisted at first, wanting to remain in this ethereal place of clarity and revelation, but the pull was unrelenting. It wasn't time, not yet. As the light dissolved, so too did the vividness of the visions I had experienced. The questions that had hung heavy in the air, the ones that had filled me with fear and awe, still lingered, but now they seemed muted, as though they were retreating to a corner of my mind where they would wait to be revisited. And then I awoke, my eyes fluttered open, greeted by a harsh fluorescent glow that seemed blinding after the gentle brilliance of the otherworldly light. The hum of machinery surrounded me, punctuated by the steady beeping of a heart monitor. My body felt heavy, alien, as though I were inhabiting a vessel I no longer recognized. The first thing I noticed was the pain, a dull ache that radiated through my chest, reminding me of the battle my failing body had endured. My breaths came shallow and slow, each one requiring effort, but even through the haze of discomfort, there was a flicker of awareness, a recognition of where I was. I was alive. "Rami!" The sound of my name jolted me fully into the moment. Turning my head with what little strength I could muster, I saw my wife sitting by my bedside, her face streaked with tears. Her hands trembled as she reached out to take mine, her grip firm yet gentle. "You're back," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, Allah be praised, you're back." I wanted to respond, to reassure her, to tell her everything I had experienced, but my throat felt parched, and the words refused to come. Instead, I squeezed her hand weakly, hoping it would convey the gratitude and love I felt in that moment. The nurses bustled around us, their movements purposeful and efficient as they checked the machines, adjusted the tubes and wires attached to my body, and murmured reassurances to my wife. One of them leaned closer, her voice calm and professional. "You had us worried for a while, Mr. Khalil," she said. "But you're stable now. Just rest. You've been through a lot. Rest." The words seemed both foreign and inviting. My body yearned for it, but my mind was restless, filled with the remnants of the journey I had just returned from. As the hours passed and my strength began to return, fragments of my experience came rushing back, visions of light and darkness, the throne, the scales, the questions that had pierced my soul. They were more than memories, they were imprints on my very being, shaping the way I now saw the world. Later that evening, when the hospital room was quiet and my wife had fallen asleep in the chair beside me, I stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. The fluorescent light above seemed pale and lifeless compared to the radiance I had encountered. I had seen things that defied explanation, confronted truths I had long avoided, and felt the presence of a force so immense and all-encompassing that it had left me irrevocably changed. But now, back in the realm of the living, I found myself grappling with a single question: what now? My journey wasn't over. Of that I was certain. The voice I had heard, the questions it had posed, the visions it had revealed to me, they weren't meant to be forgotten or dismissed. They were a call to action, a challenge to seek answers, and live a life rooted in understanding and truth. But how was I to begin? In the days that followed, as I slowly regained my strength, I found myself overwhelmed by the enormity of what lay ahead. My faith, once unshakable, now felt fragile, like a delicate thread that could either unravel completely or be woven into something stronger. I turned to the Quran, hoping to find solace and guidance in its verses, but as I read, the familiar words took on new meanings, as though they were speaking to a deeper part of me that I had only just begun to uncover. The stories of the prophets, their trials, and their unwavering trust in Allah resonated with me in ways they never had before. One verse in particular stayed with me. Do they not reflect within themselves? Allah created the heavens and the earth, and everything between them for a purpose and for an appointed term. Yet many people deny they will meet their Lord. Quran 38. The word reflect echoed in my mind, a gentle reminder that understanding begins with introspection. I realized that my journey was not just about seeking external truths, but about confronting the truths within myself, the doubts, fears, and questions I had buried for so long. One evening, as I sat by the window of my hospital room, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. The light that I had seen, the throne I had stood before, the questions that had been asked of me, they were not just experiences to be remembered. They were lessons, gifts from Allah, meant to guide me toward a deeper understanding of my faith and my purpose. With this realization came a sense of peace, though it was not the kind of peace I had felt in the light's embrace. This was a different kind, a peace born of acceptance and resolve. I didn't have all the answers, and I knew the path ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in my life, I felt ready to walk it. As I closed my eyes that night, a quiet prayer formed on my lips, a prayer not of desperation, but of gratitude and hope. "O Allah," I whispered, "guide me as I seek your truth. Grant me the strength to face my doubts, the courage to ask the questions that frighten me, and the wisdom to accept whatever answers you reveal. I am yours, now and always." And with that I drifted into a deep, restful sleep, knowing that my journey was far from over, but feeling prepared to take the next step. The air in the hospital was stale and heavy, but to me it felt like the breath of renewal. Returning to my body hadn't been a simple restoration. It was as though I had been rewritten. Yet the task ahead loomed dauntingly clear. What had I returned for? What did it all mean? Days passed, and the hum of medical equipment became a familiar backdrop. My wife visited daily, her gaze a mixture of relief and unspoken questions. The light touch of her hand on mine reminded me that I wasn't alone, yet I also knew this journey, the one inside me, was uniquely mine. I spent hours reflecting on the visions, the throne, the voice, the scales weighing my life, and the moments of doubt I had buried under layers of conviction. As a man of faith, I thought I had all the answers, but what I realized now was that my faith was not a shield. It was an evolving, breathing connection that demanded depth, honesty, and introspection. When I was finally discharged, the quiet of home felt like a reprieve. No machines, no fluorescent lights, only the gentle sounds of wind brushing the curtains and the distant call of the adhan from the mosque. Yet I didn't step out to lead the prayer as I had for decades. For the first time I listened as a member of the congregation, humbled and reflective. The months that followed were transformative. My sermons no longer came from a place of unshakable certainty. Instead, they began from questions, inviting others to wrestle with the intricacies of faith, doubt, and understanding. The voice from my experience still echoed within me, urging me to seek truth, but also to share the necessity of questioning, the bravery required to face the unknown with humility. I began to speak openly about my near-death experience, to the surprise of many. I expected skepticism, even resistance, yet what I found was a profound hunger. People listened, their expressions revealing the tug of longing for answers and the fear of truly seeking them. Faith isn't static, I told them. It isn't fixed or rigid. It flows like water, carving paths where there were none before. One morning, after Fajr prayers, an elderly man approached me, his eyes misty with emotion. "Rami," he said, "you've given me hope. I've been carrying doubts for years, afraid to speak them aloud. But hearing your story—" He paused, placing a hand over his heart. "Feel lighter. Is it truly okay to ask questions of our faith?" "Brother," I replied, placing my hands over his, "to question is not to doubt Allah's mercy. It is to seek Him more fully, and every sincere question brings you closer to understanding His greatness." The conversations that unfolded from moments like these became my new purpose. I began to guide others not as a man of answers, but as a companion in seeking. It wasn't my role to lead people to truths. I understood that now. My role was to walk alongside them as they found their own. At home, my family's dynamics also began to shift. My wife, ever steadfast, had always trusted in my devotion to Allah, but now she sensed a difference in me. She observed as I recited the Quran, pausing to truly reflect on every verse, allowing the words to settle deeply. Our evenings became filled with discussions, questions, and shared wonder, a partnership of faith that felt like a rebirth for us both. My daughter, however, was slower to embrace the changes. "You were always so certain, Baba," she said one day, her voice tinged with confusion. "You told us to trust without question. Now you ask people to question? What does that mean?" "It means I was wrong," I told her, holding her gaze firmly. "It means faith isn't about avoiding questions, but about having the courage to ask them. Certainty can be comfortable, my love, but it can also blind us. Allah has no fear of our questions, only of our silence." She didn't respond immediately, but her expression softened. I knew it would take time. Perhaps I wouldn't have the answers for her, but I hoped I could give her the space and freedom to seek her own. Years passed, and my life settled into an unexpected rhythm, one filled with simplicity, humility, and the constant pursuit of deeper understanding. The mosque remained my anchor, not as a place of authority, but as a gathering point for community, reflection, and shared growth. One evening, as I stood in the garden after Maghrib prayers, I gazed at the stars above. Their quiet brilliance reminded me of the moment I had seen the vastness of creation during my journey. The same stars, the same heavens, yet now they held new meaning for me. "Thank you, Allah," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "Thank you for the questions, for the trials, for bringing me back. Thank you for making me see east." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the kind of peace born of certainty, but of trust. Trust in Allah's plan, trust in the unknown, trust in the endless journey of seeking. Rami Khalil's story, his legacy, became one not of answers, but of pursuit. He didn't preach perfection, but pointed others toward the beauty of imperfection, toward the light that flickers in the darkness and the questions that lead us ever closer to the truth.